Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Don Shipman. This past Tuesday, a special election was held for the 2nd Hamden and Hampshire Senate District to fill the vacancy caused by the resignation of Senator Don Humison, who is now the mayor of Westfield. So joining me today to discuss Tuesday's election and other issues facing legislators at the State House is State Representative John Velis, a Democrat who currently represents the 4th Hamden District and who won the special election on Tuesday. So first, congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming on the program, of course. I want to get started here because why did the state decide to have a special election when the seat was up for re-election in November?
Well, keep in mind that the election was initially scheduled for March 31st as opposed to May 19th, and that obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, it got pushed back. The reality of the situation is that there are close to 150,000 people who have been without a state senator for about 5 months now. And there's a lot of critical things going on right now. So from my standpoint, it was absolutely critical to get the people in this district a seat in there. So this election was happening either way, whether it was May 19th or March 31st. And I'm just glad that here shortly, the folks in this district are going to be able to have someone who represents them at this critical time period. And there's also Senate rules that are different from the House rules, that per Senate rules, you can only have a seat vacant for a certain amount of times. So it was actually required by their laws, by their rules rather, their internal rules. So,
do you plan to run again in November?
Oh, absolutely. Already on the ballot.
Already on the ballot. All right, ready to go. And you won actually by a pretty large margin there. When will you be sworn in? And is there going to be a special election to fill your current seat?
So the former question first. I don't know exactly. The results have to be certified by the governor's council and then obviously sworn in by the Governor Baker himself. So kind of waiting for those logistics to happen. Those conversations are actually happening right now at a leadership meeting. And then kind of what I just said about the Senate rules, the House rules, because of the time period, how close we are to the November election, there will not be a special election to fill my current seat. That will be decided in November, and then with the new state rep being sworn in January of 2021.
What do you hope to accomplish in the next, I guess, 7 months, right?
If you look at everything that's going on right now and kind of the dire financial straits that we find ourselves in as a Commonwealth, juxtaposed next to the fact that this seat has been vacant for so long, the thousands upon thousands of people, I just want to make sure that the people of this district have a seat at the table. There's going to be a lot of discussions, a lot of legislation, and obviously we're going to take up the recovery and obviously come up with some type of a stimulus package. So I just need to make sure that the constituents of the 2nd Hamden and Hampshire have a seat at the table. Absolutely critical. So I think between now and November, it would be kind of naive to not think that the overwhelming majority of the work is going to be a direct response to COVID-19, both the continuing to stop this virus, to continue to flatten that curve, what I like to call the secondary effects of it, which are the devastating impact this has had on the economy of Massachusetts.
I want to talk more about that in just a moment and the opening up of the economy here in Massachusetts. But first, the 2nd Hamden and Hampshire Senate District includes 11 different communities, including East Hampton, Granville, Montgomery, Russell, Southwick, Southampton, also Tolland and Agawam, Holyoke, Westfield, a portion of Chicopee. Talk a little bit about this Senate district. It encompasses everything from cities to small towns, each with various population sizes and needs. How do you plan to approach the differences that they all have?
So I'm a big fan of what Tip O'Neill said, that all politics is local, and that the best way to find out about any district or any group of people is to go where they are. So over the course of the campaign, I sat down with leaders, local elected leaders, knocked on thousands upon thousands of doors. So in many respects, you kind of treat every 11 city as town almost as its own separate entity, whether it's broadband internet access in the hill towns, whether it's PFAS water in Westfield, whether it's algae blooms in the Congamon Lake in Southwick. The thing that I've really come to appreciate is that each city and town has its own unique set of challenges and complexities. And then of course, there's the political component of it. One of the things that I love about this district is that it's got everything from the, we'll say the most progressive, if you will, in a place like East Hampton, and then kind of going to the exact opposite end of the political spectrum, a place like Southwick, very conservative. So you deal with each community, you meet them where they are, you talk to the people, you see what makes them tick, you see what the issues are, and then you take those issues and you bring them to Boston and zealously advocate for them. And the cool thing about, the politics of this district is when you have both sides of the ideological spectrum, I've been joking around and saying what you have as a result of that is someone who's kind of right in the middle, someone who's more of a centrist, which fits my political DNA profile to a T. So I'm really looking forward to representing the people here.
And there's also cultural differences here as well. Social, economic diversity in each of these communities. How do you address those aspects?
I think it's kind of the same way that I just said. You have to realize that people are different. And, I would knock on some doors in certain communities and we talk about the national politics of the day, and they would express an opinion that would be, one way. They would talk about what's going on and they would say it's awful. And then you'd go to another community that's only located 5 miles away, and they'd say the exact opposite, that they love everything that's going on. So it's about building consensus, compromising, meeting people where they are. And the one thing that I've come to the resounding conclusion about is that, again, whether it's East Hampton, the hill towns, and everything in between, what I've come to understand and appreciate is that human beings on the most fundamental level are all decent. And the best way to go about starting any conversation, whether it's socioeconomic differences, race, gender, anything in between, if you just start off and talking about what you have in common with somebody as opposed to what differentiates you, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to reach some type of consensus and compromise. So I think there's always room for compromise, and I think that we'll be able to get a lot of things done in a very short time period. So yes, many differences, but many commonalities as well.
Yeah, everyone wants to be heard and everyone wants to live their lives. We're going to continue our conversation right after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We're back here now, 22 News in Focus, and today we're talking with State Representative John Velis. On Monday, Governor Baker unveiled phase 1 on the reopening plan for the state, and this is part of a 4-phased plan. So I guess first, what are you hearing from all of your colleagues in the state legislature about this plan of action?
So I think overall, if you look at the job that Governor Baker has done throughout, I think he's done a really good job. I mean, in many respects, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place in that what is absolutely paramount is the public health and public safety. That's paramount. And then on the other side, you have an economy that's been absolutely crippled by this. So in many respects, this is a balancing act. This is about, can we open up this economy? Can we reopen this economy, but do it in a safe way, and trying to avoid at all costs what so many public health experts have predicted, which could be the COVID-19 kind of rearing its ugly head in the fall. To the extent that there's been some pushback and some of the concerns that I have had in particular when talking to a lot of the, we'll say, small business owners out there, really concerned about the fact that forget about how business is going to be when they return, it's are they going to be able to return? And one of the things that a concern that I've heard from colleagues as well as constituents and small business owners is what's going to happen, what's going to happen with consumer confidence. A big part of this debate has been, is it safe to go back? Can my business open up? And then what's left out of that discussion a lot from my perspective is consumer confidence. Are consumers going to go back? Are people going to start to go to these restaurants? Are people going to start to shop at small businesses? So I think one of the things that I'm looking for, and I know a lot of my colleagues have mentioned too, is a little more detail in some areas. The governor came out, this previous Monday, a week ago, this past Monday, with his reopening plan. Sorry, the Monday before, when he came out with his 4 phases and announced that he was going to have his reopening issued this past Monday. And that got a lot of people guessing. And one of the things that I heard from a lot of businesses, well, it's not as simple as kind of just turning on a light switch. There's things like inventories. There's things like appointments. And my office has just been inundated with calls. And I've been stopped kind of out on the street with people asking me, what does this mean that I can open? I've got this many employees, can I open? So to the extent that there's any type of critique, if you will, I think it's that there's been not as much clarity on the guidelines and some of the executive orders. But again, I say all of that with the caveat that I'm not envious. Governor Baker's in a very unenviable, unprecedented, circumstance right now. So hearing a lot from both constituents, from small businesses, and as well as colleagues. So there's a lot of different thought processes, but I would also just caution that it's also very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback on a lot of this stuff. So overall, I think the governor's done a good job.
Yeah, I was listening to the governor actually in an interview on NPR this week, and he was saying, since he's taken office, there's been gas explosion, there's been some tornadoes, there's been an ice storm here in the western part of the state, and now COVID. So there's been a lot happening. There is a lot of concern that the state is not going to be able to pay its bills, including supporting social service programs, as tax revenue has fallen. Is there a plan being crafted now into the budget to address all of these shortfalls?
So one of the things, so obviously you've got the rainy day fund that we would like to avoid if we can. But probably even more importantly, this past Monday, the United States Congress, the House of Representatives, passed another stimulus package. So obviously all of us lawmakers at the state level, particularly those of us who sit on the Ways and Means Committee, are really interested to see what the Senate does when they take that up. There is a serious, profound trickle-down effect from the federal government to the state government to the local governments. And the next aid package, if you will, it's projected that there could be about $500 billion in direct aid to both the state and local governments. So we've got the local leaders kind of looking up to us at the state level, and then us at the state level, we're looking up to the federal government and saying, we need some guidance. We need to know if this aid's going to be coming our way, because until we get some of those concrete answers, we can't tell our friends and counterparts at the local government, this is what you can expect. I think for the short term, what you're probably going to see here in Massachusetts is these month-by-month budgets. A couple weeks ago, you saw us pass a law, allow the treasurer to borrow more money. And let's call it like it is. Sales tax revenues are down. I read one report where budget projections are going to be about $6 billion less than what they were even projected this past January. So there's a lot of challenges that affect a whole lot of different actors. And one of the things that's become unambiguously clear is that this is going to be kind of a holistic response. Local governments aren't going to be able to respond to it without state government buy-in, and state governments aren't going to be able to respond to this in the most forceful, compelling way without buy-in the federal government. So for those of us who've never experienced something like this, which is all of us, truly unprecedented in the magnitude and the complexity of the financial implications for everything that's happened.
I want to talk about nursing homes now, and specifically the Holyoke Soldiers Home. It was hit particularly hard by the virus. What should be in place now to prevent another deadly outbreak in these types of facilities? And I bring that up too because there's a lot of talk of a second wave, a third wave possibly.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened at nursing homes and these assisted living facilities throughout the country is an absolute it's a moral tragedy. And it's something that as lawmakers and those of us in the business of kind of allocating these resources, we need to do everything we can to ensure that these nursing homes are adequately funded. Now, it's anybody who says that something like this could have been predicted, and it would be as devastating as it's been, it just wasn't on people's radars the way that it should have been. So ensuring that they're adequately funded and ensuring that they've got the right people in there in the decision-making process, and ensuring that there's a better, clearer chain of command. One of the issues that we've seen throughout this process, whether it's the Holyoke Soldiers Home or just a random nursing home anywhere in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is okay, something bad has happened. Someone tests positive for COVID-19. What steps do you take next? Who do you have to notify? Are we cohorting our patients appropriately? All of those things need to be absolutely hashed out. We need to get better guidance in terms of notifying, if that same nursing home that I just referenced to, some of the things that we've heard over and over again is a lack of PPE. The fact that certain employees are having to go to work and they're having to put themselves in a situation that's just filled with risk. So looking back at this, funding them adequately, but really ensuring that something like this never happens again, both financially, both in terms of preparation, both in terms of how we treat our patients, and both of how we update that information and kind of push it up the chain of command are definitely going to be some of the lessons learned going forward.
All right. So what's being done to support our veterans during this crisis? We're going to find that out right after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus, and today we are talking about issues important to Massachusetts residents with State Representative John Velis. For those who don't know, you're actually a major in the United States Army Reserve and have been deployed several times, including to the Middle East. Veteran issues clearly very important to you, close to your heart. With 2 air bases in the region, the military plays a pivotal role in our local economy and the community makeup as well. How is the state continuing to provide needed services to veterans?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to mention is that the role that the National Guardsmen and women have played throughout. We just talked about nursing homes a couple minutes ago. It's been the members of the Guard that have stepped up and helped out with testing and have helped up with so many of the different things going on at the Holyoke Soldiers Home. So just recognizing that and ensuring that when duty calls, that we do everything in our power, everything we can in terms of resources, in terms of legislation, to make sure they're taken care of. You know, I had the opportunity to get called up as a reservist for a few days at the beginning of this pandemic. And one of the things that I was absolutely intrigued about is a unit that was going to be deploying to New York State and then some of them to Washington State at the time, you know, those 2 places being the epicenter of this COVID-19 pandemic. And this young soldier who I was help processing with his paperwork, he told me that he received orders that were anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months. 2 weeks to 6 months, and he told me that he had just had a little baby the week before. So I just kind of try to put myself in his shoes and imagine a situation where I had to tell my new wife, and you know, who was just the mother of my new child, that I'll be gone anywhere between 2 weeks and 6 months. And it was just yet another reminder about the sacrifices of service members, and that a lot of us, even with this global pandemic, there's a lot of people throughout this that are continuing to have to go to work, and not just go to work, pulled away from work if they're in the Guard or in the reserves, to go be on the front lines of fighting this global pandemic. So those of us who are in a position to do something about it and thank them and take care of them, and as importantly, take care of their families when they're doing what they're doing, we need to do that. So there's been a huge impact on our service members here in the region, here in the Commonwealth, as well as throughout the nation, and we just owe them just such a debt of gratitude.
And it's interesting too how there's really is a trickle down effect. You mentioned, you know, the families they leave behind for that duration, but you also mentioned their place of employment, holding their job while they're deployed, and their coworkers who are helping to fill in and help out as well. So it really does trickle down, doesn't it?
That's a great point. You know, one of the things that a lot of times people forget is that it's the employee. So if someone's in the Guard or the reserves, they get called up to deploy, you know, their place of work where they were working, whether it be as a firefighter, a police officer, whether they're working at wwlp. There are people in the rear who are kind of picking up the slack, if you will, and helping out. And they do it so graciously. And I'm kind of reflecting on my own experience when I got called up a couple of years ago to go to Afghanistan. My colleagues in the House, my staff stepping up to just help out, or you know, helping our service members who just kind of, it's just a remarkable process when our service members get called up to go do, it's all volunteer force, to go serve. And then the families are the ones that really, I think some of the next major pieces of legislation that we need to take up. We do such a great job in Massachusetts when it comes to advocating for veterans. No question about it. Massachusetts does the most, more than any state in the country. Now we got to really dive into some of these families issues. You know, the ones who are left behind when their loved one's gone. To me, that's the next great frontier that we have to dive into on veterans issues.
When you speak with veterans and their families during this whole health crisis, what are some of their concerns?
You know, there's actually a lot of positives. I was doing a little bit of a roundtable discussion today with some of the local VSOs. And one of the things I'll frequently check in with them and ask them, what effect, if any, COVID is having on the veteran population, particularly those disabled veterans and an older generation of veterans. And initially there was some concern that access to Chapter 115 benefits, access to the VSO buildings were going to be possible, because many of them are located, our VSOs, at town halls, and town halls are closed. But one of the great things that DVS, the Department of Veteran Services, has done is they've relaxed a lot of the restrictions. So they've relaxed some of the signature requirements. So if a veteran needs a check, if a veteran needs a benefit, those benefits are being sent out. And if they're not, that's something that me personally, I definitely want to know about. And then just some of the remarkable stories that are out there. So the local VSOs, and you probably aren't hearing much about this, are meeting every Wednesday in Belchertown. So the VSOs from all Western Massachusetts, those who are participating, and they're delivering food to all of the veterans who are in need, who might not be able to get out for any number of reasons. So we've got a lot of people doing a lot of cool things right now during this time period. So I'm convinced that we're doing what we need to do right now to continue to look out for our men and women in uniform and those who are veterans.
We're going to have the final word after a short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus, and today we've been talking about the Massachusetts legislature's response to COVID-19 and veterans services with State Representative John Velis. I want to thank you for coming on the program. Thank you for your military service as well. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me, and thanks for what you do.
And that is our program today. We encourage you to watch online as well at wwlp.com if you missed any of this programming. From all of us here, have a good day.